What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore. And this conversation with Coach Carmen Bott is going to be anything but boring. The main topic is going to be ACLs, RTP, that whole nine. But Carmen is not shy at sharing her opinion, and neither am I. So sit back. We both shared our coffee cups beforehand. So if you're watching, we salute you. If you're listening, hopefully you have some coffee because it's early in the morning for us when we're recording. And Carmen, introduce yourself to anybody that maybe not know who you are. You are a veteran of Strength Coach Network, so thank you for being on.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I'm an old lady now, guys. I'm been doing this since 1998, so over 25 years. And my first contract was with a women's college basketball program. After that, I went over to a university and helped the team win two national titles. And during that time with the university, we actually didn't have any ACL tears, but at the time, I didn't realize that that was amazing. I'm actually realizing it more now, having fast forward time. And then, in between that time and where I'm at now, I've done work with all kinds of different athletes and not just female basketball players, lots of football players, lots of wrestlers, even triathletes and cyclists, but they don't tend to have this type of injury. And so I've sort of circled back to a roster of clients that are rehabbing their knees. Sadly, it's a huge mind fu, the rest of that word, for these people, because the injury is very catastrophic and there's a lot of doubt and whatnot. So that's where I'm at now. If you catch me in a year, I might be onto a new project, but I'm knee deep in rehab.
Pun intended or no?
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
The pun was intended, folks.
The pun is always intended. I'm
Um,
Canadian.
so with the ACL stuff, like for us at Towson in 2019, we had five in the year, and that was the most we had ever had. That was a
Right.
statistical outlier. And there was contact injuries where it was like
Hmm.
direct contact. It was an O lineman got hit three different ways, running back got hit three different ways. The other two were what you would call the upper body perturbation, and then one of them was just a pure non-contact made a cut. My first question to you, from what you've learned over your years, is why is it not considered a contact injury when the upper body gets hit and they call it that perturbation? Because that definitely affects what happens.
That's a great question. Classifying injuries is certainly not research I've ever conducted, like injury surveillance type research. That's usually conducted by athletic trainers, and it's usually, um, you know, like they put things into categories based on body type, and if that body part, or not body type, sorry, body part, so ankle, knee, hip, shoulder, etc., and if that body part is hit or contacted, then it's a contact injury at the ankle, for example. So I think it's just an oversight and it's a pretty rudimentary approach. I think what needs to be done is more video analysis after injury to talk a little bit more about the forces that might have been involved, the biomechanical factors that might be involved, and to help us understand better why some athletes are more vulnerable than others. But it's not being done that I can see, at least in the literature.
Because that was something that did drive me crazy. And that year, it wasn't only just me. You go back and if you look in the archives of 2019 at Towson, there was lacrosse, soccer, women's like it was kind of,
Yeah.
it was everywhere, and a majority of them were playing on a specific field. But it was a women's lacrosse player was bending over to get something, got pushed, hyperextended the leg, right? And it definitely, like you said, it not only can mess with the athlete, but I think we need to mention the fact that how much it actually messes with the strength coach too, because it can start to make you wonder if you're actually good at your job.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and the thing about all these sports you're mentioning is they're all invasive. They're all contact sports. They're collision sports. Even like women's lacrosse, it's not the same as men's. The rules are different, but there's incidental contact by all means. And, I don't think we necessarily have the appreciation for the forces involved in some of these sports. And then you couple that with turf. right? So imagine just deciding, okay, I'm going to put my buddy in on the beach and bury his foot in some sand, add a little bit of cement to that. The foot's nice and secure, and then I'm going to run up to him and smash him in the chest and see how his ankle handles that, and see how his knee handles that, right? I think maybe what needs to happen is laboratory type experimentation, obviously, using surrogate type limbs, but having these forces really measured, like you said, where maybe the knee or the ankle itself isn't the joint that's being perturbed, but other areas. But when that foot is planted in turf with cleats, how is that different than sticking your buddy you know, in some cement and trying to push him over, right? Like if the foot's not going to move, something has to give, and the ligamentous structures can only handle so much force before they rupture. I mean, every soft tissue in the body has a strain threshold. And the strain threshold can be improved with strength training. We know that. But if the timing of that event and the forces of that event are high, then there it goes. And so there's a lot of things that can't be necessarily prevented. And I know that you hate that term, and I do too, because all we can do as practitioners is mitigate risk. And we can do that by making sure, athletes aren't exhausted when they go into those cuts at the end of practice, that practice is designed in such a way to foster maybe the higher velocity movements done earlier on, just like in the weight room, right? We're not going to do our power cleans at the end of the workout. So why, at practice, are we doing a lot of rapid change of direction at the end of practice? I'm not saying that athletes aren't fatigued in games, but there are best practices that could be employed across the board to minimize the things that we can control to some degree. But there's a lot we don't know.
You talked about surfaces, and that's kind of a hot topic right now, at least in the NFL, because Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles. I don't know what the Achilles rupture number is right now in the NFL, nor do I know to compare it to years past. So I'm going to kind of not comment on that, nor do I know the number of ACLs. But I know that more and more people in the NFL have at least been posting on social media saying, enough's enough, NFL. We need to be playing on grass. Does that really matter? Because from what I've read in the research, it seemed like it was, and my research on it is in 2020. So they happen on grass and artificial turf, right? Like it's just this NFL schedule to me is what kind of would seem that athletes are maybe overly stressed, not sleeping adequately. And I also would say, and I reached out to somebody who texted me about it, in the preseason and camp, they're doing the survival shuffle, as Dan Paff says. They're not actually doing max effort because they're trying to just get through camp. They want to get through there healthy. And then now all of a sudden, games 1, game 2, they're doing maximal effort for the first time. And now it's almost stressing their bank account more than they're used to. So that's a
Yeah,
lot that I said. What do you think about the turf and grass?
well, I think you're right. I think the jury's out, and I don't know if we can put all our eggs in that basket and just blame a surface as the culprit or the main factor that's affecting these athletes. I think what we need to do is look at medical history, and we need to look at medication use. There's a lot of evidence to support certain medications that can affect tendons and can affect the ligaments. So getting that health history on athletes is important as part of your just risk stratification. And then there is the other piece you talked about was underloading, and you're absolutely right. So we have all kinds of problems. We have the coach that overloads in camp and wants to see if they're man enough and ready to engage in, the sport. And then we have the other types of coaches that don't load the athlete enough in camp and then expect them to perform at the level they should be. What's missing is like proper simulations, and it's really about the dose of that simulation. It's not so much about not doing or not doing the simulation. So simulation in sports psychology is simulating the environment. So that's a very common word that test pilots use. People in military, they have to simulate what they are going to face, because if they don't, they aren't psychologically prepared, but then they're not physically prepared. So, what needs to be really well understood are the mechanical load factors involved in, let's say, a 20-yard entry to a 45-degree cut. That's going to have different forces than a 5-yard entry to like a post or a corner route. That's going to have different forces than a 15-yard entry to a 90-degree cut, which would be, just an out route. So, making sure that athletes can do those things, and then which is seems like common sense. And then on the defensive side in football, if that's what we're talking about, then they've got a lot more unpredictable movement patterns, right? So if you're not reacting unpredictably to a whatever stimulus, and the stimulus has to be visual, can't be auditory, it has to be the same, right? So sort of back to your points around agility, like what are we doing when we put a bunch of cones out on a field? Exactly. When we're asking someone to precisely run to here and then do this, when in a sports situation, it's really not that tidy.
No,
Mm-mm.
not even a little bit. And that's where I feel like that's what it gets my gears so grinded is just the fact that it's like we're doing these kids such a massive disservice in the name of serving them. And it's like, how do we raise awareness in the best way possible to help ultimately sport coaches be the ones that make the decisions? Is it as simple as, what you talked about that one last time we talked? And if anybody hasn't listened to that, I'm going to link it down below so you can listen to the other conversation. But you talked about like you were having beers with the head coach. Like, is it just that simple but not that easy, or how do we solve the problem?
Yeah, I mean, performance staff personnel do need to work very, very closely with the head coach and share ideas and share perspective. And if there's no communication, it often, boils down to that, then how can we expect? I mean, the sport coach they have a huge job, right? They're managing a roster, they're managing tactics, somewhat managing technical development. So they're not thinking about the stuff we're thinking about. And so you need to make it simple, you need to make it digestible, you need to have actionable solutions, not just complaining behind their back about, oh, this is stupid or these are the problems. But then at the same time, the coach, does need to be open to collaboration amongst, performance staff and things that, may they have to be able to admit that this, hey, isn't necessarily in their wheelhouse in terms of their knowledge and expertise. So it does require a certain type of person to allow an individual to come in and offer that advice and offer that feedback, maybe handle a portion of practice or whatever. But what I what I notice over my years of coaching, and this is a little bit maybe naughty to say, but I've been doing this for a long time. So when I started, I went to every practice and I was on the court with the athletes, doing their warm-ups, doing movement sessions all the time. Like that's just what I knew. That's just what I was taught by my mentors. And then I started to notice a shift over time that strength and conditioning became about writing programs and who has the best program and who can use these like really fancy methods and who brags most about their data and their metrics and their vertical jump scores. When you got kids that are like 18 that have never trained that are jumping 36 inches. Like they're just athletes, genetic freaks. It's nothing to do with their training, when they should be on the floor with the kids, teaching them how to move, teaching them how to absorb shock, how to absorb forces, teaching them how to redirect force, teaching them how to hold tension, and then taking all those concepts and principles in the weight room out onto the field. And you're teaching the same concepts now using different drills. Now we're going to do some change of direction mechanics. These are the key things that I'm looking for. And I'm just not seeing that. And I don't know if it's a case that the strength coaches are just too busy, or if they don't want to leave the weight room because it's raining. I don't know, but I would like them to giddy up. I would
I
like them to
wonder.
get out there.
I wonder hearing you say that. I mean, I do too, because I think part of the problem is having, again, quoting Dan Paff or Stu McMillan, they have a PhD in the weight room and they have a GED on the field. Like, that's probably problem number one. But then problem number two is, are these new high performance roles, whether it's an athletic trainer or they're reporting to the athletic director, and they want numbers, they want data, they want and so we're forced as strength coaches to do those things.
But who
But I
created that? Who created that? Like athletic
I don't know.
directors don't know anything about data. They know about spreadsheets and
Yeah, they
budgets.
might like
So who,
spreadsheets and
yeah,
like.
like who started this problem? That who was the person that started giving athletic directors data? Whoever they are, send them my way. Okay. So I think that's the issue. And that became like normative practice. That became like the way people should practice.
I
Like I
agree.
said, I mean, I would go to camp. Like one of my best friends is the head of performance at UBC, and he played D1 football at Utah. He's around my age. He's been doing this as long as I have. And the guy's on the field at every football game. He's on the field at rugby games. He travels with the football team. Like he's
Oh wow.
integrated
Yep.
into the staff. And so if athletic directors could figure out that that seems to be the best practice, and they may need to hire at an institution 6 different performance people that are specialists in particular categories of sport, right? Collision contact team, that's a category of sport, right?
Hmm.
Form sport would be a category like gymnastics. High
Hmm.
skill sport would be like baseball, maybe basketball. But basketball could probably be in with football and lacrosse because it's a high level contact sport. When I lived in Malaysia, we did that at the institute that I was at. We had different strength coaches in charge of the sport category. They were performance staff, and then underneath that strength coach we had local strength and conditioning specialists working under us, and we were teaching them sort of more Western methodology, if you will, and then we had a head of performance that were sort of reporting to, but not really. And it, again, wasn't so much about the data. We had a testing lab, we had a physiology lab that ran our testing, but we worked with those physiologists as well to actually come up with new tests and new ways of measuring because some of the ways of measuring at the time were irrelevant to the sport. Like we're not going to make the badminton team that's going to the 2000 Olympics run the V test, right? But we did. We developed a test where they started in the middle of the court where they had to move like in a kind of a almost like a star pattern, right? So they move on a 45 and back to center. They move straight ahead back to center. On another 45 back to center. And did like a repeat, like a RIAT type repeat sprint analysis and a performance decrement test. And then we also looked at the biomechanics of their movement on top of the performance of the test, which again is also missing in ACL rehab. On the discharge criteria, they're saying, oh, well, if the hop test symmetry is within 90% or 90, like within 5% difference, then that athlete's good to go. Yet we get them on a force plate and it's way different. But I'll be honest, a highly trained strength coach that looks at people all day long, I can see it. I can see the difference.
Yeah.
And then the force plates are there to confirm the bias that I've created with my own eyes. So I know I'm kind of ranting right now, but that's kind of where I see things a bit at. And I would like to encourage the next generation of performance people coming up to spend more time coaching.
I think I feel the same way, which is probably what, like, I've been probably saying it now for at least 2 years,
Hmm.
maybe three, maybe 2021 or yeah, I guess whatever, 2021.
Right.
But like around then, I've just been saying like, look, I think the pendulum has swung. I think we've gotten to the point where we're so data driven that eventually it's got to start driving back because at what point does the sport coach feel like they don't even have control of their team? Like if there's all these people saying, "Oh, do this and do this," and it's just like, well, what do you need me for? You need me to just be the go out and recruit and talk to boosters? Like, what's my job really then?
And could you imagine Justin going to watch the game and getting information that way?
It's a novel idea.
Or, right? Or, hey, going to practice and watching the kids that you're working with practice, getting information that way. Like, I'm sorry, we don't necessarily need to test everybody up the yin yang to determine whether or not they are ready to perform. I had an athlete who was on the USA national team for wrestling. She
Okay.
wrestled at the university here because we have a very powerful women's wrestling program internationally. We've produced several Olympians. And so this athlete started with me when she was 18 years old. She was 5 months post-op from ACL repair.
Is this the one that you presented on in the?
No, this is another one.
Geez.
This is a different athlete. The one I presented on was a Canadian athlete. This is an American girl. And she, I kind of, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I kind of snuck her into my training group with the Canadian national team and started working with her. I don't work with the program anymore, so I guess I could say this. So she just really wanted to train with the top kids, and she's a great kid. So, why not add another like amazing personality to a group,
I
right?
wouldn't
It
done the
it
same.
just totally join the party. Let's party. Let's go. So we started just training at 5 months, and we trained and we trained and we trained. Guess how many tests I did with her to return her to wrestling?
I'm gonna say
None.
3. Oh,
No, I
okay.
didn't do any. I just trained her. I trained her on everything. We trained her neck, we trained her cleans, we trained her squats, we trained her jumps, we did plyometrics, we did movement, we did everything. Everything that you would normally do in a very comprehensive holistic training plan. We monitor fatigue. We do a lot of that, fatigue monitoring, um, wellness monitoring, things like that.
How do you do that?
I'm just with some basic questionnaires, like, or talking to people. That
Right.
works. Or are you okay? That works too. Noticing, noticing works as well. Like, that person's in a shit ass mood today. I wonder what's going on. And then conversation, right? So yeah, just and making notes, right? Objective notes that didn't really, or sorry, subjective notes rather, that didn't really necessarily match what was going on the next day, but just collecting information, talking to the kids. Anyway, long story short, a year later, she did go to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. She trains there all the time and would get ready for national events. And they tested her in the lab because I didn't have access to any of that at the time, force plates and whatnot. She had zero asymmetries left to right. Force
Hmm.
absorption, same. Propulsion, same. Time on the ground, same. And they did several different jump tests. And the strength coach at the time, he's no longer with USA Wrestling, called me. He's like, "What did you do with this girl?" I said, "We just trained." Honestly, we just trained. But the czar is plyometrics. I've always done plyometrics with my athletes because I was taught. I mean, I had so many great mentors looking back. I had one mentor who was my weightlifting coach. He actually used to advise Al Vermeil when Al was with the Bulls. Yeah, he was like his main advisor, but he's just sort of like a local guy that not a lot of people know about, unless you're in the weightlifting community. And then I had a couple of really high level track coaches teach me plyometrics, and one of them is not the person, but one of them is a new business partner who studied and worked very closely with Dan Pfaff at Altus. We have a few pretty good people where I'm from, pretty good practitioners, and so I just like went to every single clinic that they ever put on. But every clinic I went to, Justin, believe it or not, was practical.
Yeah.
And we actually had to do stuff. Like when I worked with my weightlifting coach, I'll never forget this. I was about ready to squat and he wanted me to like test that day and he slapped me. I squatted the most I've ever squatted in my life. I don't recommend to your readers to slap you. Please don't do that. But he's so old school. That's my point. He was like so old school. I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe he slapped me like right on the butt.
Oh, he
I
slapped you
can't
on the
believe he did
butt.
that.
Even
Yeah, like on the
I was
hip
like, come
butt
on.
area, just like whoopish, like a horse.
So I have
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt for one
No,
second
interrupt,
because
please.
my two of my former assistants, Kate Correa and Logan Fletcher. Kate now she went to VCU, and Logan just got promoted at Towson. Anyways, they were Kate is a power lifter, and she had like a heavy squat, and she asked for a spot, right? And so
Okay.
Logan, okay, he's sitting down, he goes out, and then out of nowhere, he just freaking slaps her back. And like, because she's
Yeah.
filming it, because she has a coach too, and like she's like super startled, then has to get out of the bar and squat. And she kind of turns.
Yeah.
She's like, "What was that about?" He's like, "You said you wanted a slap." She's like, "I wanted a spot."
Sloth. Did it work?
She got it.
She did. Okay. Well, but that, like, okay, the metaphor behind that is like maybe, I'm not saying slap people, please don't take it that way and run with this. But
Disclaimer: Do
do
not.
you think that maybe elevating an athlete's arousal level as a coach in a subtle way
Oh
is
yeah.
important? But that's back to like that's coaching, and shouting at somebody and doing the rah rah speech isn't
No,
coaching.
it's
That
fake.
actually is like performing for yourself. It's pretty
Mm.
egocentric if you
Mm.
ask me. And you don't, there's only certain times you want to do that, right? If you're doing a jump test, you want to arouse the athlete. But if they're about to run through a tunnel to play a game, that is not the time to be screaming and yelling. You want to go into that situation like calm.
Yeah, but like you said, that's more about that's more about the coach. And I mean, you've talked about that at length about cultivating self awareness. Like that's kind of also been like a big rock of yours.
Yeah, I think when I went down the rabbit hole of sports psychology, that was one thing that I really took from the courses I learned from, was that we can't really intervene with mental skills without first establishing a high degree of self-awareness. So in other words, it's hard for any of us to make changes to our behavior if we're not aware of the dumb stuff we do. And
That's
we all
but
do
that
dumb
isn't that the
stuff.
first step of the 12-step program from what people keep saying. It's like you have to
Totally.
first admit like, hey, my name is blah 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 and I made blah blah blah. Like you have to admit it.
Full disclosure, yeah, you do. You have to admit it. But sometimes we don't always know what it's called our background of obviousness is. Sometimes we don't know. So we need other people around us, like a
Loving critic, you
circle,
call it,
but
right?
yeah, that will tell us. But there's a lot of people again in our industry that just surround themselves with people that agree with them. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Do that. Oh yeah, yeah, do that. Right? And it's just like high fives all around. And
Or slaps on the butt.
slaps on, yeah, butt slapping. Hmm. Versus, maybe you should look at it that way. Maybe you should, like, I tend to like seek out people that are skeptical and
Mm.
that will poke holes in the ideas that I have because I am pretty idealistic and I'm optimistic, like a bit overly optimistic. So it's nice to have people around that are like, did you maybe consider this? Did you maybe think about that? Oh, no. Whoops. Okay, back to the drawing board. That's okay. For the people that are younger in this industry listening to this, it is okay to not know. It is okay to ask for help. Is it okay to collaborate with people? Is it okay? It's okay to be the dumbest person in the room. I work at a university that's pretty much on par with MIT, and I feel like the dumbest person in the room every faculty meeting with the research staff. Like these people are brilliant, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. I know my role.
Talking about research and getting back on the
Yeah,
ACL stuff,
sure.
let's talk about, like when I reached out to you and we put out a video before on the 12-week hop testing. And for me, it's just the whole quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us out and it helps you be notified when we have new content get released. So again, please hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy this content. And with that, let's get back to the show. I don't know. The fact that it's just they haven't done anything. The athletes that undergo that surgery have not done
Hmm.
any. You use the word plyometric. First of all, I don't think enough people understand that plyometric is different than jump training. Like there has to be the eccentric,
Yeah.
isometric, concentric phase. And there is that when you're taking off, whether it's the single leg, the triple, or even now that the medial has been added.
Yes.
How can we change this for the better with more and more strength coaches, athletic trainers, physical therapists, surgeons? What needs to be done?
Well, we need to stop using hop testing as discharge criteria and looking at limb symmetry index. Athletes are asymmetrical,
Mm-hmm.
like most of the time. And the current Melbourne criteria is a 5% difference at discharge. There are labs all over the world that could show you up to a 13% difference and possibly no risk to injury because other metrics are so high and well established.
How
So
assessed? How assessed for
sorry?
anybody that's listening or watching?
Oh,
Like
this is
what?
assessed on force plates. Like that would be
Like a jump
the
or
gold
with
standard. Yeah,
a
yeah,
okay
yeah. Jump testing, single leg jump testing. Um,
double leg land or single leg land?
Both, yeah,
Okay.
both. So if you have dual force plates, so you can measure the legs independently, you could do a double leg land, right?
Oh yeah.
Or you could do like in my lab at the university, I have force decks, so they
Yep.
can double leg land, but I can still get the data on both legs.
Which is
If I can,
awesome.
I can. It is. It gives us things. You know what I think that does for a newer practitioner is helps you see the things that people that have been coaching thousands of hours can already see, right? Like
Yeah.
a lack of ability to absorb force, that sort of thing. Because usually you know if you watch carefully, you can see differences between left and right. So back to your question, what can we do? Well, we need to shift our focus away from outcome testing. Outcome testing is how far did they jump? How high did they jump? How far did they jump 3 times? And then measuring that against the non-operative side. Like we got to get away from that. And what we need to come back to is looking at kinematics, looking at how people move, right? So if you have somebody do a hop on the spot at 14 weeks, 15 weeks, so the mid stage of rehab. I don't use weeks, by the way. I use early stage, mid stage, late stage, period.
Hmm.
I just returned a guy to collision sport at 5 months post-op. I returned him, I did, in April. He's a 30-year-old professional athlete. He's a big boy, literally. He made the choice. I told him what the risks were. He made the choice. He is now 8.5 months post-op and injury-free, and he competes every weekend internationally in a very, very rigorous sport.
It's kind of a mic drop moment, no?
Right? I don't know. Maybe I'm not saying this to brag or to say, look what I did. I think this is pretty special
Yeah.
on his end. I think we tried to do everything possible. But going back to my first point, as soon as somebody can weight bear on one leg, and again, it's not about weeks, it's when they're able to do that, then you need to start getting them to do single leg squats on one leg, but it's not about hitting 10 reps. That's what all the research, Justin, like my office floor right now is covered in articles, of
Anybody
which
that's
most of them
listening,
are going
she's got a big stack
into
right
the
now.
garburator or shredder or whatever destroys things because it's so focused on this outcome data and not focused enough on movement screening. Now, having said movement screening is a shitstorm all of its own. Okay?
Let's
There is
go.
no movement screen that can tell us really anything definitive about risk of injury. But what it can tell us is that someone moves like crap.
Yep.
And we're not going to load that crappy movement and we're not going to put speed on that crappy movement. Okay, that we know. And so when I'm teaching movement analysis qualitatively to my students, I'm like, this is why we do it. It doesn't predict anything. It doesn't give us insight into whether or not someone's going to get hurt. It tells us whether or not we can load that movement. So that's why early on in the rehab, you have them do a single leg squat and you start looking at the ankle, the foot, barefoot. They've got to be bare feet. I also do all my rehab barefoot, almost all of it, even outside. Then we look at the knee. Then we look at the hip. We look at the trunk. We look at the posture. We look from the front view. We look from the side view, right? And we have just a basic checklist and we look for things. And then we coach them. And then we rescreen them. Because if you coach them, you tell them exactly what to do, then you know if they own that movement. It's there, it's in the vault. Now you just need to reinforce the correct movement. Problem with movement screening is that, well, the way that Greg Cook sort of suggested, he said, okay, don't tell them. how to do this. Just see how they naturally move.
Right?
What?
I'm
Doesn't
so
make any
glad you
sense
said
at
that.
all.
I'm so glad
Right?
you said
So,
that.
right? So it's like, what? That's mean. First of all, that's just mean.
Full
You're, and
disclosure, we didn't do that at Iowa. We're like, fuck that. We literally printed off a sheet and was like, here's pictures of it. I'm going to tell you what you need to do. Show me
yeah,
if you know how to do this. Not because, like, okay.
totally. And so you want to bias them a little bit. Like when I did my master's thesis, I taught the kids how to get the best possible vertical jump score so I could actually test their power versus do they know how to jump because it's a skill, right? You got to consider all movement is skill. So an overhead squat with a dowel is a skill. Teach them the skill, then see if they can get into it, see what kind of range of motion they have, see what kind of compensations they have. And you're going to make notes on this and then coach the you know what out of these people. Coach them on how to do these things really well. And then you can rescreen their movement. Or you rescreen their movement in their training session with you. You're like, oh,
Mm,
okay, that's cleaned up. That's better. That's improved. And you just keep building them. What I'm seeing in ACL rehab is that at a certain stage, we need to test the drop jump. What? So you're going to push someone off like a box, right? They're falling. They smash into the ground. You've not taught them how to absorb load. You've not taught them, you haven't even prepared them to absorb that level of load. Now
yes.
it's like 8 times body weight and they're doing this
Yes.
on one leg.
Mm-hmm.
Except, Justin, the criteria for the drop test is to be able to leg press twice your body weight on one leg. I don't know any athletes that can leg press twice their body weight on one leg. And what athlete actually leg presses?
Correct.
Nobody. We don't
Correct.
give a leg press in your gym. No, like at
And
any
what's your
university,
depth? What are you calling it? Is it femur parallel? Is it hamstring parallel? What do
they
we
say 90 degrees. So, I mean, it's just bizarre to me. Like these are separate skills. And so the literature
100%.
calls
Yep.
they call these progressions. Okay, I'll give you a good progression. Here's a
Please do.
progression for your
Please do.
audience.
Please do.
This is a progression. Now I'm getting stressed. Okay, so you have kids, and did they learn to walk? Are they walkable?
My kids are
Your kids?
walkable. Yep.
They can walk. Okay,
They
good.
sure can.
Okay, so this is how they learn to walk. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna nail this. Okay, so they pulled themselves up
Mm-hmm.
and they held on to something and then they kind of rocked a bit. And they did that for a while. Okay,
Yep.
that's yeah, cool. And then they were like, holy shit, if I hold on to this couch, I can do this and I can move like sideways and forwards, but I'm holding on to shit. Okay, cool. That's step two. And then three, they let go and they walked a couple steps and they fell over. Is that what happened? Kind of
Yeah, a
something
little
like
bit.
that,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, they walked 4 more steps and they didn't fall over, and then five, and then six, and then they were walking, and then they were running. That's like I teach growth and motor development at the university. So we go through like these stages of motor learning with kids. And if we go back to that information and we think about rehab and we think about progressions, if you are having an athlete do a pogo leap, so a 2 foot pogo up, and you tell me that the next progression is a single leg hop, you are now in the category of, oh my God, you have no idea what you're doing to me
Correct.
because
Correct.
they're completely different. And if you actually tried this shit yourself before you taught it to other people, you would know that there is a gap between these two motor skills that is this wide. So back to the problems in the research is that we've got people that are good at research, people that collect data, people that are in a lab collecting this information, which is great. We just don't have enough people on the ground doing good rehab plans. And understanding load, mechanical load, and understanding motor behavior, biomechanics, and how they relate to learning skills, motor skills, and progress in a, it's not periodization either. It's just progression. It's just a linear progression from A to Z. That's why my course is called ACL Rehab from A to Z. Z to me is a collision athlete that has to decelerate rapidly and absorb massive amounts of force. That's Z. If someone told me, if you said, Carmen, I've torn my ACL, can you please rehab me? I'd like to return to jogging. I would say, Justin, there is no honor in jogging. No, I wouldn't say that to you. I would say, I will return you to O. Does that make sense? So it's A to O for the jogging client.
Yeah.
A to Z is a different client. And so we've got all this research not really being clear on what is the task that this person has to get back to. And then, so we're going to do hop testing with the person that wants to be able to jog. We're going to do hop testing with the person that wants to break, change direction, and absorb contact as a linebacker. Is that the same thing? Right? No. So it's super important that therapists understand the different demands of sport from the lens of mechanical load. And if you haven't played these sports, that's fine. But at least as an S&C or a therapist, get out there and do the drills to understand, like, wow, if I sprint in a straight line for 20 yards and then put the brakes on and then cut at a 90-degree angle, that's pretty hard compared to sprinting for 5 yards and doing the same cut. Oh, okay. Now, but I'm not being like a jerk here, but now we can, now we want to do like a hook pattern, right? Like a 180-degree cut. Like that's really common in soccer. Athlete runs forward, plants their outside foot, and then has to redirect their movement 180 degrees back the same direction they came. The forces on that are much higher than a 45-degree cut, right? Linear speed, like all the track people out there that think that it's like running in a straight line is God's gift to performance. Good for you, but again, if the person only does like 45-degree cuts in their sport, that's going to help. But if they have to be able to, completely change direction, and in basketball, I mean, they're changing direction every 1 to 3 seconds.
Yep.
Basketball is the ultimate form of change of direction and reacceleration. So, and in order to reaccelerate, you have to decelerate. So there's very little linear speed. The only thing that I love about linear speed coaching is this idea of it happening somewhat in the sagittal plane, and that when we do teach change of direction well, we are teaching athletes to refine the sagittal plane as quickly as possible, because that's where they can generate the most power and where there's less aberrant forces on the knee. Like if you come out of a pro agility, right? Like on that first cut, so you're running you're kind of shuffling crossover, and then you cut and you head back to run the 10 yards. Yeah. What you're doing is you're trying to redirect the body to find the sagittal plane. Yep. And that right away, if you took a quick screenshot of that, that is acceleration, linear speed acceleration for like 2 steps, right? 3 steps. So I think there's merit. Like I still teach the mechanics of sprinting to athletes that need to sprint, but I don't throw all my eggs over there. That's a component of what I'm teaching. And then if you teach from a place of principle, this is where you're going to use this movement strategy in these patterns, in these patterns, in these patterns. Then it makes sense to the athletes too. Like it's easier to sell. Like if you try to convince an O lineman that they need to run like repeat tempo 100 meters, and I've seen these kinds of programs, like they don't want to do that. No, it's a long distance. 100 meters is like, for them, it's like a 10K for me.
Now, are you breaking your field and weight room days apart? Is that what has been recommended the most in the literature that you've seen? Are you combining days based off of facilities and availability of the athlete, or what is your optimal world of how you like to go about working with people in their return to play?
That's a great question. There's nothing in the literature that really has definitive conclusions around sort of a microcycle model. I think we need to look at, as opposed to energy systems, we need to look at forces. So when you're doing activities that have the highest levels of force, and they tend to be activities with heavy eccentric work, like rapid eccentric work, I would put those on the same day. So let's say it's Monday, and then Tuesday would be maybe some core work, some tempo type work. I do for ACL rehab, one of my secrets that I'm going to share with your audience is I do kettlebell swing protocols very early on. As soon as the athlete can stand bilaterally with even weight distribution, they're kettlebell swinging to the yin yang. Okay. Like we're talking 10 swings on, 20 seconds off for like 20 minutes straight. You do the math on that. Hundreds of reps. Hundreds. Yeah. And it's really good for reestablishing hamstring strength, glute posterior chain strength, low back. You don't have to do any of those, dinky exercises like low back extensions. You could just do swings. Lots of them. Heavy, right? So guys are swinging 28, 32 kilo bell. Girls are swinging a 16, 20 kilo bell with one arm, but you could also do it with two, like whatever. If a guy has really broad shoulders, I would not advise a two-hand swing. It's biomechanically pretty tough. Get them doing a one arm, but girls can do a two-hand swing. So yeah, on their energy system days, because they can't run yet, right? It's tons of swings. Swing, swing, swing. It restores hamstring function, very little DOMs. It's awesome. Reinforces the bilateral squat stance, and then when they're ready you can start loading them up. Like I've had athletes at 4 months post-op squatting 1.5 times their body weight.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've gotten away from barbell work simply because I bought a flywheel, and so the guys and girls that I'm training in my garage gym are using the flywheel as their stimulus for lower body bilateral strength and power. But we still do cleans. You can do cleans as early as a month post-op, just muscle cleans. Yeah.
What one excites you more working with? Is it the combat athlete? Is it the basketball jumper? Like what's the one that you're like, all right, this is a new challenge. This is in my wheelhouse. This is the one that like, man, I love this.
I tend to, because I came from team sport, Justin, like you did. I have an affinity for working with team sport athletes in general. Like, and they could be basketball, they could be football, they could be lacrosse. Lacrosse athletes tend to have the best humor.
Huh.
Like so funny. It's ridiculous how funny these guys are. Yeah, and cutting. Oh, they're naughty. They're great. So lacrosse is lacrosse is fun. They're tough. I spent a lot of my early days in pro hockey actually. I worked
Yep.
with one time I remember losing the Canucks number one goalie on a hike. Oh yeah. I was like, where the hell is this Dan? He's gone. Oh fuck. You know, like we were looking for him. So yeah, yeah. I like team sport athletes a lot because I think I can relate to them, right? Like often their bigger fears on the return to play piece when we get into the psychology, because that's a huge part that's again not focused on enough, at least in the research. But I'm sure there's lots of people out there doing good work in that area. But like psychologically, team sport athletes, when they're returning to play, their biggest fear when you sit down and talk to them is letting their teammates down. And I relate to that because I have a certain like level of anxiety and paranoia that fuels me on a day-to-day basis of letting people down. Like for example, me talking to you right now, I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I'm hoping I'm helping people that are listening to your show. And if I'm not, I feel like a loser. That's my,
Yeah. First of all, I don't
Not
think
what
that's.
I
Yeah, no, I don't think that's the case. I think they're
No,
getting
but
value
that's
from
my
this. No, yeah,
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 but
I hear
that's
you. I hear
my
you. I
my
hear you. Yep.
seriously like my fear, and I love being a team player. I do. And so to me that's super fun, right? Just to be around a bunch of like-minded people. So I tend to find I left combat sport a few years ago and to never return.
Yeah, combat sports are a different animal for
Yeah,
sure.
they are. They're not for me. That's all I'll say. Not for me. Hmm.
What still drives you? What still fuels you after all the time? And like you said, you've been doing it for so long, and you've worked with so many sports. Like it would
Coffee
be.
fuels me.
But like,
No, but
what's
fair.
yeah? What is it like? I mean, you've been doing it for a while. You've worked with a lot of different athletes, a lot of pro athletes. Like you could just be like, you know what? I'm kind of done. Like this is like, what is it?
That's a good point. I'm done. Maybe I'm just
You
quit.
know what? I'm just after
Sorry,
today
guys.
the light bulb is on and I'm done.
Yeah, you
Thank
you
you.
put an idea in my head. Hey, maybe I should stop. What I've done is I've tapered the amount of coaching I do over the years. So, I used to spend, 20, 30 hours a week coaching. And I think every young coach needs to do that. That's where you build your skill set, right? And then after you've spent 5 or 10 years, 30 hours a week actually coaching people, you can start to taper back. So I hold kind of a membership offering with my services. So meaning people are a member of what I do, and therefore I only take on a certain amount of clients at any one time. Then I can be really, really dialed on managing their case. But what fuels me is just seeing other people accomplish what they set out to do, their goals. I mean, it sounds super cliche, but if you spend your whole life focused on yourself and trying to, all the self-help stuff that's out there, all that messaging, you'll be miserable. Like one of the key facets of happiness is to help other people and help empower other people. And it gives me a lot of like satisfaction. And then it also gives me really good material for lectures if I'm teaching at the university to talk to my students about certain cases that I've worked with. I do enjoy the rehab, the return to play, because it's really high pressure. I like that. Bring it on. It's a challenge. It's like, can I do this? Can I get this kid back and have them not get re-injured? And I have, in my career of 25 years, I haven't had that happen yet. And I say yet because I'm not naive. Shit can happen. And when I say not hasn't happened in a non-contact setting, right? Like a contact ACL trauma is not preventable, to use that naughty word, right? It's if someone lands on your knee and they weigh 300 pounds, it's probably gonna break.
You talked about I mean, first of all, I agree with you on that. There's nothing to prevent that injury unless you just low level let somebody get cut blocked and into it, and not going to happen. You've been
Right.
educating the next wave of strength coaches, and you've been seeing them because being lectures. And what is the biggest gap? And that's what we believe at Strength Coach Network that we're doing. We're bridging the gap from what is taught in the classroom to what actually happens in the weight room because we feel like there's a gap. How big
Mhm.
is that gap? How are you able to close it with your the people that you work with, and what can us coaches look and continue to mentor the younger generation of coaches with?
It's a great question. I think some of the gaps in a university setting. I don't want to speak for my university because they have me, and I'd like to think I am bridging a pretty good gap, but we're not perfect because we often have big classes. And that's problematic in of itself. If you have a lab of 40 students, you can't have 40 students in squat racks that are novices and one teacher. Like you can imagine that situation, and that's terrifying, right? So it's like having a bunch of ninth graders in a weight room, you know. And I work with ninth graders at a high school every winter. They're awesome, by the way. But yeah, usually I'm screaming, kill you. Anyway, so that in of itself, just the structure of how university is taught is a barrier, right? Because you've got a big class and you've got a bad ratio. So what we do with our students is we get them set up with in practicums or with the performance staff at the university. They hold like an internship, and they'll take a bunch of students that are interested in the performance piece. A lot of students nowadays, in my opinion, are less interested in high performance and more interested in like health, wellness, gen pop, clinical. So that's another thing too, right? A lot of undergraduate programs in kinesiology are trying to cover every population. So it's not really until grad school that students are highly specialized. And I want to work with athletes. I want to work with clinical like cancer patients or stroke rehab. So you have to understand that a lot of university programs are not just centered, I mean, some are, but a lot are not just centered on high performance. So, we can criticize these programs all we want, but they're not delivering good strength coaches, but that's because they're trying to teach a very broad palette of information. And hopefully what the students are getting, and every university teacher will say this ability to critically think. Well, what does that mean? Right? So I define it in first year because it's in the textbook I wrote. What does it mean to be a skeptic? And we go through a whole chapter on like
Can
looking
you be
at,
skeptical on what it means to be a
yeah,
skeptic? Like,
yeah, exactly. So, just challenging the status quo, learning how to, like, we teach the students right away in first year that, if you're looking for information, probably go to a lit review or a meta analysis first, because that synthesizes all the information that in that topic. And then there might be some studies that are within that analysis that you want to look deeper at. So we do teach the students that, and then that way that they can find good information. Now, that's assuming that the research
yeah.
is full of the stuff you and I do. Well, I'll tell you right now that there is no study that I have found, and I reviewed last weekend over 500. It sounds like it's a lot, but it's not because I have a system. So I did it pretty quickly, but I reviewed 500 studies to look for a comprehensive exercise-based return to play program for ACL. There's nothing. So that's why I decided to start my course, ACL Return to Sport Rehab course. It's an online course. I start tomorrow, the first cohort to teach them. These are the exercises you want people to be doing at each stage of rehab, and that rehab shouldn't even be timeline based because everybody's different. Everybody adapts at different rates. Like if you had a group of freshmen in your weight room, Justin, would they all adapt exactly the same at the same rate?
Nope.
No, right? So could you imagine putting a timeline on your freshmen to hit a 2 times body weight front squat? Could you do that? Could you put a timeline on that?
No,
Okay,
but
so why are we doing that in research? So
I
there's a
would I would say
what
that
yeah, go ahead.
insurance companies. I would say that insurance companies for the return to play, and then the
Hmm.
surgeons that perform the surgeries, they're the ones that want to just. That is my initial response. Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you guys about our sponsor, TeamBuilder. If you have any online training platform needs, TeamBuilder is the go-to place. TeamBuilder has the ability to integrate with velocity-based training tools. They have the ability to program and have notes and videos for all of your athletes and your clients. This is your number one stop shop. Been using it since 2019 when I was working at Towson. So I've used it, love it. Make sure you check it out. Go ahead, click the link down in the description. And with that, let's get back to the show.
You're absolutely right. We can play that game with the insurance companies, and we can write our reports with that, but that's not necessarily how we're going to practice, and that's unfortunate.
Correct.
So with universities and with preparing your audience, new strength and conditioning coaches, you're not going to learn how to coach exercise very well at school. You're going to learn about prescription of exercise. That's easy. Anyone can write a program. That's easy. Coaching is the hard part. And I'm not saying you need to go and start taking leadership training courses and communication courses. I'm talking about knowing precisely what the criteria is for optimal movement. It's within a frame too. It's not like a dot, like on a bullseye. It's a frame. That's optimal. And then knowing how far away this person is from optimal. And then you have to figure out how to get them here by using pedagogical strategies, which is teaching, right? Proper progressions and a good understanding of motor learning, how people learn. And it's not all about cueing. I know that a lot of people think that if I externally cue, magic shit is going to happen. It doesn't. I internally cue all the time. And I know the kids I work with know how to do things well, because what'll happen is I'll send them off to say somebody else and they'll coach them. And like when I sent one kid to Chris when he was at SFU, he was like, Carm, like this kid moves like a genius. Like he moves so well. Good job. I'm like, of course he does. No, I didn't say that. I was like, yeah, like I've spent time with him. I've coached him, right? Or I take my buddies, guys that are at the other university, and if I'm prepping them for some combine stuff, um, I usually when I have Joe's athletes, they all move like really well. Really well. Like, okay, do this. And I'll make them do a drill they've never done before. But because they understand movement from a place of concept and a place of principle, then all this other stuff. But we tend to teach from like this other stuff. Do this drill. Do this drill. How about what are the commonalities in the movement between all five of these drills and just teach that, and then they'll be able to do all five of these drills. That's what pedagogy is. And it's a lot, movement is a lot more simple than people are making it seem like on the internet. It's not complicated. And you just need to spend time coaching people. And guess what? You're going to make mistakes. You're going to ask them to do things. You're going to say, hey, well, try it like this. And you'll be like, oh, no, never mind. Don't do that. But that's okay. There's some trial and error, but that's what universities typically missing. And I also think universities need to do more oral exams. So I do an oral lab exam in my course.
What's that look like?
So the students have three stations, and one station is like an intake process, like the interview process with the initial client. Could be an athlete, could be, and then they move to my station where they, from a laundry list of like 50 different tests, they'll have to do three. So they have to memorize the protocols for every single test. And then the third station is movement. So they have to coach because they're in partners, they have to coach their partner on like a squat, a deadlift, a lunge, a pull, a push, or a rotational exercise.
Wow.
Yeah. hmm hmm
That's no joke.
So
What are the tests that they can choose from for the different protocols?
okay. So the test could be anywhere from a YMCA cycloergometry submaximal aerobic test to a ACL return to play single leg squat qualitative test to a shoulder range of motion goniometer test to a shoulder range of motion qualitative test. The one where you're just laying on your back, you flatten your low back, you bring your arm, like that test, that might be on it. Hamstring length, the Thomas test for hip flexor length. So each lab covers a different component. We'll do a mobility lab, we'll do a strength lab, we'll do a power lab.
You read my mind because I was like, that sounds
Yeah,
like there could be like, could somebody only pick the mobility? You're like, no, no, no. You need a mobility, a strength, and then a, conditioning.
exactly. So each lab, like last night was our first week of the term, so it's all intake in lab one. So we do resting vitals. I think athletes should have their blood pressure testing. Okay, all you strength coaches that love these isometric mid thigh pull, scared dog butt uh, drill, did you test their blood pressure before you had them do these things, right? Like we can't assume nowadays that every athlete is healthy.
I also want to
So
test resting heart rate because I think that's your easiest way to prove that you've improved their conditioning
absolutely.
right there. Like,
100%. If they're over 60 BPM and they're a soccer player, then they got some work to do. So we do resting heart rate, yeah, resting blood pressure. We do some girth measurements just so they understand like how to do those. Because that's for Gen Pop. That's lab one. Lab two, we do movement screening. And I have a whole bunch of different movement screens and we criticize them. We don't just do FMS, we do a few different ones. And then lab three, we measure balance and core trunk endurance, and we do a little bit on what is core stability, is this a thing, like how do we measure it, and what the students learn is that they can't, there's no way to measure core stability. There's no way, there's no test for core stability, yet every therapist says, well, that person lacks core stability, and then I'll say, well, how did you measure that?
I always say
How
that.
do you know?
Their glutes
But
are
you
weak.
and
We
I
put them on a
know if
table and we push their leg down.
exactly. But you and I know if someone lacks core stability if we're watching them change direction.
Yeah.
Like if they're moving like, like jello, like a bag of milk, we know that we've got some work to do, right? So you're of my generation, so you know what a bag of milk is. The younger people will be like, milk used to come in a bag? Yeah,
Uh,
dudes. It used to come in a bag. You used to have to cut the end off and stick it in a Tupperware container. Google that shit. Okay, so, but we can see that, right? We can see that's just overall lack of strength. Then we do some maximal aerobic speed testing in another lab. We do submaximal aerobic testing and predicted testing in another lab. We do a mobility lab and flexibility lab. We do an ACL return to play lab, and we criticize all the hop testing. We do an agility change of direction lab, and I'm missing one. I can't remember it. But
how
those
do
are all
you
the labs we cover.
how do you do that
Yeah.
in a non only sterile clean lab way, like on field for
Yeah.
your team sport athletes? Like how do you do that, and how do you recommend it for our listeners?
Like when you're going to go and you're going to test athletes.
Or yeah, like how do you actually? Because that's been one of the biggest things for me, and that's why I was trying and continuing to learn with the PhD and doing the research. Like, how can we take these concepts? Because, like you said, okay, the research that I was reading for the dissertation was, hey, we're going to do our loaded jumps on either a Smith machine or our unassisted jumps with these massive bungee equipment that people don't have. And it's like, how can we bring this
Mm.
to the masses where coaches can actually do it and can understand qualitatively what to do? So, how do you go about recommending that, and how do you teach it to your class?
Yeah, I think that's a great point because not everybody has access to, like you say, facilities and force plates. And for the longest time in my lab, we just got force plates, and I just started using them, this summer. Okay, so what did we do? And there are a lot of things that clinicians and strength coaches can do using 2D camera analysis. So I actually have a tutorial video on how to do that in my membership portal on my website. So that's a bit of a plug. Sorry
Yep.
about that, but
Well, no,
there
don't be
is a
sorry. We're going to add
way
the link
there
down below.
yeah, there is a way to do good high level testing that can give you some good information about how people are moving using your phone. Okay, and obviously you need to ask permission for your subjects. Can I film you? But I think what we need to get away from, Justin, is outcome testing. How fast did this kid run in the 40? How high did they jump? How far did they broad jump? Unless we're actually preparing them for a combine, right, which in reality they are doing outcome tests, what we should be doing is determining what's limiting their performance. So why isn't somebody jumping 36 inches? Well, because they gained 20 pounds of body fat over the summer. One of the lowest hanging fruit for speed and power is body composition.
Yeah.
And not enough coaches, everyone's afraid to talk about that. Everyone's afraid to say, you're a little bit chubby. All right. I went to Europe this summer. I had a great time. I lost weight. I wanted to lose weight, but it was so damn expensive to eat in London. I was like, all y'all, you're starving. Forget it. We're not eating today. We're going to walk for like the whole day. Okay. But it does help. So we wanted, like, when we're screening and doing our intake, we want to start thinking about things like, body comp. Why are we not thinking about, and I think you had a guy on recently that talked about muscle mass and lower body or something.
Scott
Why are we
Prohaska,
not
yeah.
talking,
Yeah.
why are we not talking more about muscle mass? I have a young girl that I'll probably work with who just had ACL surgery about 4 months ago. Basketball player, super tall, lanky, basketball body,
Yep.
and is very under muscled for what her body needs to be able to do in that sport. And we're not talking enough about, look, you need to put on some size, you need to put on some muscle mass. And how do athletes put on muscle mass? How does that happen, in your opinion?
They're going to lift and they're going to have some time under tension. Like,
Yeah. And is it comfortable putting on muscle?
no,
Is it
that's,
what about doing jumping? Is that's pretty comfortable, isn't it?
no, not even a little bit.
It's comfortable. Putting
Yeah.
on muscle, is that comfortable? So why are we pulling kids away from things that are uncomfortable?
Hey, yeah,
We are doing a lot of that.
we are. And that's, I mean,
Hmm.
hearing you talk about it, like, okay, instantly, if you talk about the weight stuff, like, okay, if it's typically within sex, guy to guy, girl to girl, not as big of a deal, but it's a little
Yeah.
taboo when you're, when Kate was the nutritionist strength coach for us, and she would have no problem like talking to the guys because she had a great personality. But as a guy
Yeah.
trying to talk to a girl about it, like it's a little bit difficult, and that's why you have to learn how to manage that
Yes.
situation and truly just speak it. And they're like, hey, this is not me saying anything about you as a person. However, you are carrying excess weight that is not contributing positively to what you are trying to do performance based wise. So let's do the things that help us get rid of that or improve the strength.
So do you think people are shying away from that conversation then? The male strength coach to the female athlete, they're avoiding and shying away from that conversation.
I can't
So they're
prove
not
it,
doing
but
their
I think
job?
so. I do.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Years ago, I did a talk at Oregon State, 2009. I went down there and did a talk. I remember Nick was there, Winkleman. He and I both did a talk at a state clinic. And my talk was called To Battle or to Bond, which was a talk for strength coaches to work with female athletes versus male athletes. And you obviously don't want to come into the female locker room with, a million solutions and identifying all their problems. Like nobody should do that anyway, right off the bat, because you need to establish rapport. But once you've established rapport with an athlete, however many sessions that takes, and you sit down with them to go through their testing results, you can ask them powerful questions instead of being the person to bear the bad news. You can ask them, what do you think would improve your vertical jump performance? Let's just use that as an example because that's a strength to weight ratio test, right? What do you think? Do you think that there's a relationship between body composition and power? What are your thoughts on that? And just get them talking. A lot of times, athletes will identify precisely what you're after. And then you ask them, would you like some help finding a solution to that? Because I'd love to help you,
That's some black belt thinking right there. That's
right?
also, but
And
that's parenting right there.
that is,
like,
it really is parenting.
like as you were
Nailed,
talking, I'm like,
nailed it.
man, I kind of do that with the kid. Like when they're yelling
Yeah,
and they're indoors, I'm like, are we indoors or are we outdoors? We're indoors. So should
exactly.
we use our indoor
Versus
voice or our
yelling,
outdoor
versus
voice?
saying, stop yelling,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, you've got to get them thinking about their thinking. That's called metacognition. So if you can get people to think about their thinking and think about their actions, I don't know what that's called, then they can arrive at the solution and to their problem themselves, and it becomes their idea. People are naturally resistant to feedback, Justin. We all are.
And they
Like if
love
you
their own
said,
idea.
Carmen, I
Yeah.
don't like your shirt because it says, I wore it on purpose. It says
Bored.
board. Yeah, I don't like your top. I would immediately take offense to that. I wouldn't show it. I would take offense and I would be like, I'm going to wear this shirt anyway, right? So people are naturally averse to unsolicited feedback. So in order to bridge into that gap, you need to start asking powerful questions. And a powerful question simply means it's fairly open-ended, it's non-threatening, and it gets the person thinking about their thinking. And sometimes they don't come up with the right answer right away, but you just kind of drop it. You just sort of leave it. Like, do you think that maybe X is related to Y? Or what do you think about the relationship between X and Y?
Absolutely. I
Like,
mean,
rather
yeah,
than
I'm
me
just,
telling my athlete not to go back to sport at 5 months post-op, right? I didn't say, oh, what are you doing? Like, why are you going back to your sport? That's crazy, bro. Right? I was like, okay, I'm curious if you're aware of the risks involved. Now, what do you think those are? Okay. All right. He says it out loud. He knows. He's taking ownership. So I told him, I said, so what my role is going to be in this situation is I'm going to support your hope. And if something happens, I'm going to support you no matter what. No judgment. Because there's a part of me that really gets him. Like I played sports until I was 40. Not at a super high level. I played varsity softball, got cut from the team because I couldn't hit. Fair. I have like the worst eyesight ever. So
it's
after
okay.
that, I continued to play softball for fun. I played basketball all the way in a pretty competitive co-ed league until I was about 30. And then I started playing football, flag football at 30. And I was like, this shit's bananas because I can run out to dribble the damn thing. And I played and played and played. And I remember having my son, and then I returned to football. I had a C-section. I returned to flag football at 4 months after I had my
Jeez.
son. I ripped a hole in my groin. I threw on some core shorts and kept fucking playing because I loved it so much. And these were my girls. These were like my friends. There was nothing more relaxing for me on a Saturday was having played a game and it's sunny out and the wind is blowing. It's fall. There's leaves on the ground and I'm having a beer with my teammates and there was just not a better feeling and I was chasing that, And so yeah, I have a mesh in my groin now because of it and I've had a few hernias repaired, but honestly, was it worth it? 100%. Honey pea. That's what the youngins say. The Ute. Honey pea.
Honey pea.
Honey pea.
Oh,
Hunny.
yeah, yeah. Keeping it
Honey
honey.
pea, like
Yeah,
100%. It's
yeah.
honey pea.
I thought you meant honey, like
Yeah.
the food. No,
Like the
I'm losing it.
sweetener.
Yeah, I'm losing it.
No, it's okay. I'm clearly losing it too. So yeah, I get it, and back to your question around like why do I do this? It's because I get it. I know like that there's gems in there, even though like it's a grind. Playing sports at a high level is a grind, but there are moments that outshine the grind so much that it's
Mm.
so worth it. And when you're young and your body's young, why not chase that?
Amen. I
Right?
don't
Like
think
they
there's.
just canceled the football program at my university, and I've shed tears over that decision. That's some. I know how shattered these young men are.
I can only imagine.
Devastating.
I can
Yeah.
only imagine, and I think your point about chasing those moments that help outweigh the other things. That's a great place to end this, to respect the fact that you are going to go be a mom and take your son to school. But you've talked about it. We're going to link it down below. But just again, quick little again plug for the ACL cohort and courses and things that you got. So where can people find
Oh,
that?
thanks, Justin. Yeah, I decided based on all of this work and research to put together a course. And after some deliberation, decided to offer it online because people can't obviously always come to where I am at. And because we have such great capability with technology now to offer even video analysis online, decided to do that. So the first cohort sold out quite quickly. And it starts tomorrow. So I will be offering the second cohort in the new year. And it's 8 weeks long. It's an hour and a half lecture each week, homework assignments, some readings, nothing crazy. It's not a summary of all the research. I promise it is actionable, practical. This is what you want to be focused on early stage rehab. This is what we want to focus on mid stage. This is what we want to focus on late stage. A to Z, meaning Z is taking an athlete all the way to black diamond skiing or decelerating and absorbing contact. That would be the czar of performance when it comes to knee rehab. However, people that work with athletes in other sports where they may not need to harness those forces will still benefit from the course. It just means that the exit criteria, the discharge criteria would happen a little bit sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that. And then if people are just interested in learning more about change of direction coaching and plyometrics, I have a membership portal on my website that pretty much is three main topics: repeat sprint ability, change of direction and plyometrics, and mental skills training, because those are my areas of expertise. It's $19 a month. People can sign in onto the portal and access all of those webinars, as well as I have a crib section, right? It's
Cribs.
called the crib. Yeah. I am a hip hop star in on the side. That's what I do on Saturdays. So in the crib is a bunch of cheat sheets. So we all need cheat sheets as practitioners, right? So it's just like stuff people can just download, put on their office wall, and be like, "How do I do?" Oh yeah, there's the prescription. Bam. Okay. Because I want them focused on coaching,
Amen.
not writing programs.
Well, thank you
That's
very
it.
much for your time.
Thanks,
You go
Justin.
about the rest of your day and have an awesome Wednesday.
Thank you. You as well. Bye.
That was awesome. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.